Yesterday, the Court of Arbitration of Sport ruled on the Alberto Salazar case, upholding the former Nike Oregon Project coach's 4-year ban. Already served 2 of them. Remember, he was banned during the 2019 World Championships in Doha. They found that he had committed and confirmed the following rule violations: possession of testosterone, complicity with Dr. Brown's administration of prohibited method, as well as tampering with the doping control process having to do with L-carnitine. Dr. Brown also was suspended as well for a series of charges. In the response, Alberto Salazar basically said, well, none of this had anything to do, as the CAS statement said, that with any evidence that NOP athletes doped, and saying that no competition was impacted by these technical violations. He calls them technical violations, and that he generally took great care to ensure that any new technique, methods, and substances were lawful under the WADA code. Now, USADA wanted a larger ban. Salazar obviously wanted no ban. So the Court of Arbitration of Sport upheld the 4-year ban. So, Gordon, what we had here basically is both sides, basically between USADA and Salazar slash Nike, who was defending him here, claiming at least partial victory.
Yeah, I mean, there's that highlighted line right there where it says, no evidence put before the CAS as to any effect on athletes competing in the elite level within NOP. So they basically are saying what Salazar's victory claim is that they have not proven that any of my elite athletes were doping in competition, out of competition, or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, he's like, you are basically banning me for ethical violations, for doing shady things, going to the gray area, doing these weird tests with my son and with
Mhm.
Magnus, holding on, like possessing, the drug, the testosterone. But he's saying, well, you got me on all that, but you don't got me on actually putting it into the athletes' bodies and them winning a race because it was in their body. It's all technicality. You know, it's all technicality because this suspension, first of all, this investigation started all the way back in 2015. So it took 4 years for the suspension to be given in 2019, and then another 2 years for them to decide if that suspension was legitimate. So you could say it was like a 7-year process, maybe even longer, because people were probably looking to try to get him even before 2015. This whole thing is just like a decade long. You did this. No, I didn't. Yeah, you did. No, I didn't. Prove it. Well, I have this. That's not enough. Well, that's enough. And all this craziness. And it finally, I feel like it's coming to an end. We're like, all right, the highest court in the world decided it's a 4-year suspension. That's what it is. Okay. No
Mhm.
more. Did it not? Now, again, Alberto's going to claim, hey, you still don't have me on the actual big nugget of a positive,
Right.
doping sample of an athlete. But I think court of public opinion is going to probably be a little bit different with like, hey, yeah, we don't have you on that, but we have you on this, that, and the other thing. So it's going to really come down to court of public opinion versus people who will defend Alberto till they die. And everyone wins. The people who don't like Alberto win, and Alberto can feel like he won because he's not banned for life within this ruling, because we'll talk about he does still have that safe sport suspension, potential lifetime ban hovering over him with the whole Mary Kane situation and other athletes who came forward with non-doping violations, but more ethical coaching style violations.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to hear you talk through it in that manner and basically say claiming partial victory and yet being banned for 4 years. But that is the tone of this response. And Nike said in their response, there was no finding that performance enhancing drugs have ever been used on Oregon Project athletes in the panel went out of its way to note Alberto's desire to follow all the rules. We're glad to see that CAS reiterated this in their decision and stated that the way the case was handled was disproportionate to the severity of the violations established. Alberto is no longer a contracted coach, and we shuttered the Oregon Project almost 2 years ago. So that last paragraph tells you a bit, though, too, as well, too. Like, hey, he's fine. He went out of his way to follow the rules, but also, he's not one of our coaches, and we canned the team. USADA is basically saying we tried as best we could to prove this case, and a lot of the stuff that came out in that initial 2015 report, I don't know how closely you followed that or how much you remember it, right, Gordon? There was all these reports about, and some of the details were just so compelling about, drugs being carved into books, and there was the spreadsheet and all the different whistleblowers coming together. I think in people's mind, they thought the suspension would ultimately come as a result of those very, very serious allegations, and the ban would come sooner than 2019, but also would potentially be lifetime. Instead, what you have here is we're talking about possession of testosterone, the issues with L-carnitine, which Kaz is saying didn't impact competition, didn't impact didn't dope any specific elite athletes. But that, I mean, in that sense, so it's irrelevant because what he did still broke the rules and still is enough to garner a 4-year ban here, right? So
Yeah.
claiming victory while you still have a 4-year ban. So it may not have been the big downfall that a lot of people were hoping and a lot of people came forward were hoping, but the end result still here is he's out of the sport for 4 years and potentially forever, depending on the safe sport thing. Ever since the allegations by Mary Kane, and then which were corroborated by another set of athletes came forward, I always thought that would be more damaging to his ability to coach again than the investigation with USADA, right? Just because of the nature of what was said by his athletes and just the emotional power that those statements had. Um, and we're in a situation now where that ban might be longer lasting than the ban that was brought forward by USADA. What do you think
Yeah, and
about?
there's been many athletes who have served bans and have gone on to be relevant in the sport post 2-year bans, post 4-year bans, even post longer bans. We have coaches who've come back from bans, you have athletes,
Mhm.
and the in the know track and field world would always use that as like a scar on who you are, as like a mark, like, hey, well, we know what you did in 2004, we're not going to forget
Yeah,
about it.
yeah,
um
yeah,
but like at the same time, people, I guess, time not heals, but time just kind of, all right, whatever. Yeah, we don't want to be talking about what happened a different decade ago. We only care about who's winning and losing right now, and
yeah,
constantly bring that up can be tiresome. I think in general, I mean, I feel like a lot of people have already kind of moved on from Salazar. You know, a lot, we talked about the NOP kind of disbanded and all of them kind of
yeah.
leaving permanently or going towards Pete Julian. You have other athletes going with different coaches. And you kind of just feel like it's the end of the era ended. Like the era ended in 2019. There
Hmm.
isn't going to be some back moment, really. I just feel like people have, I think the sport has kind of just moved on. Now, maybe Alberto's like, yeah, the sport may have moved on from me, but 2023, I'm coming back louder than ever. But like, how old is Alberto? Alberto, what,
In his 60s.
yeah, he's, what is he? He's 63. I guess, I mean, some coaches do coach all the way into their 70s. So he'll be 65 when it's over. People retire at age 65. So maybe Alberto should just, he's done so much, right? It's not like he has anything left to prove with his running career and with um, his coaching career. Now, obviously, all that kind of has a big blemish on it because of this cast ruling and also the
Yeah,
safe sport eventual ruling, and maybe he just has like this desire to clear his name. But it's like, hey man, sometimes it's better just to sit it out and just be like, all right, you
Well, who's going to want to
apologize.
be
Yeah, you don't want to like kind of like punch back. Like sometimes punching back, you don't. It may feel good, but it's not gonna make anything better. Like you can't punch your way back out of this and out of the Mary Kane situation. It's like
who's
you just gotta
who'd want to be
like
coached by him?
move on. I mean, the people who would be maybe more international athletes who aren't as connected to the U.S. you know news cycle and aren't really as in the know of like the story that Mary Kane had and kind of can show negligence or ignorance towards it because they're just not part of that world. So I can see
Mhm,
that. I also could see maybe a younger athlete who just isn't like in the know, like, oh, okay, yeah, sure.
mhm,
Like people forgive and
yeah.
forget easily in society. And I think some people, maybe like 10 years from now, everyone's gonna be like, oh yeah, remember that one time back in the 2010s
Yeah.
or 20s, So it's just a long. This is a long-winded way of me kind of talking in circles. Where this, I mean, kind of has a little bit, dare I say it, kind of similarity to the Shelby Houlihan situation, where someone is going to be given a 4-year ban. Both are kind of claiming victory. It's not really just an obvious, you did it, you admitted to doing it, you're serving, and now we move on. Just like in Shelby, she did it. She's not really admitting
Yeah.
to purposely doing it. She's serving and moving on. This seems like he did it. He's claiming it's not that big of a deal. Cass is saying it is a big deal. Therefore, 4 years.
Mhm.
And we're just going to always have the, like, I don't know. It's just
But
like
the
a
difference
weird, it's
is
just,
the
yeah.
the difference is the Houlihan
What's the
thing.
difference?
Well, the Houlihan thing, all of a sudden, boom, it happened, and 4-year suspension. There was not this
Yeah.
drips and drabs of years and years
Right.
of this person spoke out or this person says this is going on. Like the rumors around Salazar predated 2015, and maybe there were similar rumors in the Houlihan case, and they just didn't bubble up to the level to where we heard them. But stuff about Salazar had been going on for years and years, and then between 15 and 19, only intensified. And then you add on the other layer of the safe sport investigation, which adds just a completely different dynamic to it as well. But going back to the athletes here, in Doha, that's all everybody wanted to talk about. Now, I get it because the suspension happened literally while they were there. But Donovan Brazier, you know, races in an NOP jersey or race in an NOP jersey, but was coached by Pete Julian, but he was still getting the questions, right? Everybody was still throwing the questions at him. If you had raced or run for Alberto in the past, you were getting the questions. If you had run against an athlete, run against a Salazar coached athlete, you were getting the questions. Now I feel like, as you said, the end of an era. Someone like Galen Rupp, who is forever linked with Salazar because he coached him in high school. He's his first major athlete and had the greatest influence on him. I feel like Rupp, the next time he makes a public appearance, public statement, he'll get asked about it and he'll answer, and then that'll be it. Like I literally think that there'll be one more cycle because now the ban has been upheld, and that'll
Right.
be it. Safan Hassan only answered and basically was exclusively asked about Salazar in Doha. I don't think she's going to get it maybe more than one more time about the ban. And she'll say, I respect the ruling of Kaz. I have a new coach now. I'm looking forward to 2022 and beyond. And that's it. And anybody who would take a different approach, or anybody who, if he's allowed to coach in the future, would agree to be coached by him, you're just signing up for meet after meet, interview after interview, criticism after criticism, and having to explain away his record. So that's why I don't understand why would anybody do that? Why would anybody want to participate in that?
Yeah, I. It's like, why do you want to deal with that headache? I mean, but some people don't care. I mean, there were athletes who, in the middle of Alberto, like Alberto, like investigation, public investigation type stuff, started hitting in like 2015, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So, and there was times between 2015 and 2019 where new college athletes were choosing to still go to NOP, even under all of this stuff, right? Because they were
Yeah.
told, "Oh, don't worry, it's gonna," So don't. Some athletes won't care, I think, but I think in general, he's just gonna be so separate from. He's been so separated from the sport. He'll be even more separated by the time 2023 comes around. It may become a lifetime ban with the Mary Kane safe sport allegations and potential lifetime ban. That it again, I just think it's over. Like it's time's up. It's done. It's okay. Not it's okay because he did some things that are not okay, but it's okay to not keep fighting. Like it's okay to just be done with it. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
that's what I hope
Well,
happens because I don't
if
want to ask these questions again. Like it's like annoying. We know what happened. We know his style was extremely fishy with what the cast report came out with. We know now his style was also extremely a little unethical with what Mary Kane has been saying. It's like we get it. This guy was an extreme guy that probably broke some rules. Did break some rules according to this, not just probably. And
Mhm.
that's it. Like there are people in this world that do this, and he was one of those guys. He's going to still claim that he's a perfect person or whatever, but we got to
Mhm.
move on. I just feel like we got to move on as society. If we're constantly like just thinking about Alberto, what's the sport? The sport. We should be thinking about the successes of our sport, not the blemishes. I get it. You need to talk about the blemishes to make sure there's not new blemishes in the future, and that's important for our
Mhm.
sport because we can't just turn a blind eye to
Yeah.
cheating, turn a blind eye to bad coaching. But at the same time, if all we are constantly thinking about it, we're just turning a blind eye to great coaching. We're turning a blind eye to not cheating by only thinking about Alberto. I mean, that's how I felt with the whole Russia situation. Every news cycle is talking about the Russia doping like thing,
Mhm.
and like we're like, oh, are they going to be banned from the Olympics? Are they not? I was like, guys, what are we doing? It's the same story. We know it.
Mhm.
I don't know. I just get kind of sick of the same. We just
Well,
circle
the
talk. I'm
reason
circle talking myself away, but like we circle talk away around Alberto constantly. Like Alberto. I'm like, man,
he's just a
like,
massive figure. He's a massive figure
yeah,
in the sport, and that's why. And if it was a different coach that didn't have the profile of Alberto, that didn't have this famous running career, that people of our parents' generation didn't know, then it would not be as big of a deal. But
yeah,
because he is the name, because he had this audacious goal, right, to put American distance running back on the map, and to some people, they think he succeeded in doing that. It brought with it all this extra attention. And people, they latch on to this story of, this guy who flew too close to the sun. Like he's willing to do everything to get every advantage, but oh, he stepped over the line here, and he just wants to win. Like they create this story in their head, and then it makes it impossible for people to turn away. Because then there's just the regular story, the regular track and field story of stories about PED and stories about um, coach athlete abuse allegations and stuff like that, right? Which happens frequently throughout the year, but not to I mean, he's the most famous coach in the sport
yeah.
by a wide margin. He's the most famous coach in the sport, and with that is going to come all this extra attention. So it makes it, it on top of just the headlines that are jaw dropping sometimes, and the details that are jaw dropping. You have a famous name attached to it, but if there was a czar of track and field or a czar of America, well, I guess there sort of is, Subco, or in the United States, the head of USATF, you'd want him just to go away at this point. right? Because
I
you
think
don't
yeah,
want the next US championships or the next US trials to be about this because you are so
yeah.
sick of every single time a major championship comes up that stuff like this gets brought up. And now maybe there'll be a new bad story to fill that void, but if that was your job, you would want to turn the page.
Yeah, I think people want him to sit, they want they because this is even though we got a conclusion here, we still are getting, hey, I still won, guys.
Mhm.
2023, I'm back type feeling. Um, but I think we want like that Oprah moment, right? Where Lance Armstrong just sat down and said, I lied. I was an asshole. Boom. Now people still are gonna it didn't make people like hate Lance more or less or like really change people's minds, but just put an end to like, okay, we know what happened. It's
Yeah.
Lance Armstrong finally just said, I did this and I didn't do that. Boom. Okay, we can move on now. We know the story. We know the beginning, middle, and end. There's no more like, well, technically, holding the testosterone isn't as bad as putting it in the body. All this bullshit. It's like
Yeah,
we
yeah.
just need conclude. We need finality, and
He needs
given
to
this
go on
cast,
Oprah.
yeah,
But
he
the
needs to go on
problem is
Oprah and just give us
he's a
finality.
famous coach. He's not famous enough to go on Oprah. That's what you're saying the issue
True.
here is. He needs to
Yeah.
be a little bit
Well,
more
maybe
famous.
what's the next level down from Oprah? I don't know. The View? No. Ellen? I don't know. What do you go on? I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't know what
know.
these kids
I'm
kids
not
these days are
up
going
to
on.
date. I'm not up to date on the daytime talk shows. That's a good point.
Do you
That is a good
think
point.
do you think this story of the whole NLP thing is going to be at all potential worthy of a movie, a fictional movie, not like a biopic type movie?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I think he's as a character, people find him compelling. Certainly. So yeah, I Travis just sent us Oprah is the FloTrack podcast. Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. A lot of people have compared Gordon to Oprah in
Sure.
terms of his abilities with the microphone to interview people.
I just think if we do get a biopic, Salazar needs to be played by J.K. Simmons. I think he would be perfect at that role.
Well, because of that movie where he's what was that movie? You're just
Whiplash?
putting him into Whiplash. Yeah, you're basically just
Yeah.
putting him into that
But
role.
now put him as a track coach, It'll be like,
Yeah,
whoa.
yeah.
So people would watch
I
it.
I think people would. I mean, it, and that's the other. Like, you think that there's probably another book coming. Like, there's no end to this where it just he goes quietly, right? I'm not saying he's going to get back into coaching if he's allowed to, but there's going to be a book or there's going to be something where he tries to push out his side of it. I think.
Yeah. Well,